Now, each Sunday at this time, as you know, we look at the big stories and the big issues in crime this week. And as always, Jackie Hames, former Metropolitan Police detective, is here. Good to see you, Jackie, as always. Let's talk this week about police and crime commissioners. It's been 2 years since those controversial elections in England and Wales. Very few people actually bothered to vote. As we know, it has been controversial, Jackie, hasn't it?
It has been very controversial. Something like 12% of the public voted in those last elections. And in fact, next week we've got the first real test because the West Midlands, unfortunately, the PCC died recently and they're holding a by-election. So it'll be interesting to see whether there is an upsurge in support and interest in the role of the PCC, who has taken the place of police authorities and are now an elected politician. In advance of that, I had a chat with Kevin Hurley, who's the PCC for Surrey, as about what he felt the role was and how it was developing and whether he felt that it would continue and had value in the community.
Most of the public, I think, still don't know what this job is, and probably the best way to describe it is it's a bit like Boris's job in London, except you haven't got any tube trains or buses, or in my case, the hair.
It's your chance to vote for the person who will oversee the police in your local area.
A vote to decide who will oversee how your local crime-fighting budget is spent.
Well, I'm Kevin Hurley. I'm the elected Police and Crime Commissioner for Surrey, and I'm one of the 12 independents. There are 41 of us up and down the country, 15 Tory, and the other 14 are Labour.
You were elected back in November 2012, so it's been some 18 months now since you've been in post. When you were elected, there didn't seem to be much of a job description. How's it panned out?
Your main responsibility is to build public safety in all its senses across all the boroughs and districts in a county. So the job is not only, if you like, overseeing what the police do on behalf of the public, but it's also getting the borough councils, the health service, Crown Prosecution Service, court service and probation to work in the interests of victims and the public.
And how are you working with your Chief Constable, for instance? Has the role been welcomed?
Well, I don't know whether or not the Chief Constable or any other Chief Constables welcome it. I suspect some don't. However, in my case, I take a very clear view that I will not intrude in any way on operational police work. It might be a surprise, bearing in mind I was once a senior cop myself, but I take a straight line that I deal with the politics, the media and partnership building.
So it's almost become like another MP.
Oh, no, this is very, very different to an MP. There are 11 MPs in the county. This is far more influential than a backbench MP. Police and crime commissioners have got unique powers within democratic society. We've got executive authority over a whole host of different areas, and it's steadily increasing.
And yet a lot of people still don't know that PCCs exist, or indeed what they do.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I like to think in Surrey, where I am, the post is gaining more and more, I won't say notoriety, but more and more profile. But even today I was speaking to someone who hadn't heard of a police and crime commissioner. So there's a long way to go in spreading what this job's about, because it is, in my view, a positive role. But what are the downsides? For me, it's the almost constant attack on the morale of the police coming down from central government. And quite frankly, how on earth do we expect police officers to go out and do the difficult and dangerous job they do when every other day they're being criticised at the highest levels of government? If I ever made one plea to the Home Secretary, it was, please stop attacking the police. What do you think you're doing? You're not making it better.
And how has the cuts affected you in the way you want to implement your priorities?
The bottom line is our budget is being cut from 207 million to about 170 odd over the next few years. It's a matter of austerity and the fact that government chooses to cut the police more than perhaps health or education. We have to work with that. It's a real problem, but the fact of the matter is police across the whole country will not be able to do what they did once before because there's simply not enough of them, enough resources.
Now, you've just been given a grant, £460,000, huge amount of money from the Ministry of Justice to help your victim support systems in the area of Surrey. How come you got it and nobody else
Well,
did?
I'm really lucky. I've got a great team of young people who work for me in my office who put together a really good case about how we wanted money to give better support to victims of sexual offences, victims of domestic violence, and also to look after people who have had to run away to a refuge because they're being beaten by their men. And they've put some tremendous cases together, and I'm pleased to say the Minister of Justice has given us quite a big slice of the government's pie.
Are you comfortable that you have a good understanding of what the public want?
Well, what the public want, from what I hear from them, is they want the antisocial people who blight their lives dealt with, whether it's anything from littering, fly tipping to neighbours from hell. They want violent bullies dealt with, people who burgle their homes and who deal drugs to their children and young people. They tell me there's only one place for a burglar or a drug dealer, and that's locked up in prison.
And do you think with the current cuts that you can still achieve that?
Well, one of my disappointments at the current time is that there is a reduction in the amount of prison space available. I really want to see burglars and drug dealers and people who rob you on the street, people who carry knives, being locked up for much longer. Because when they're locked up, they can't predate on us. Never mind the cost, it's much cheaper to keep a burglar locked up in prison than it is to pay his rent, pay his social benefits, and then deal with the mayhem he commits while we're trying to rehabilitate him in the community.
So, Kevin, how do you see the future of the PCC role? Do you think it continue, or do you think there'll be another lot of elections, or will the system change again?
I don't think it will change again, because I think both parties are now realising that they are an improvement on the older system. We've got real challenges. You know, the cutbacks in funding for everyone in the criminal justice system, in particularly the police, is a real problem. And the constant attacks on the morale and the motivation of the police by the Home Secretary is a real threat, I think, to our well-being.
Will you be standing next time?
Whether or not I stand in this post or not, it remains to be seen. But I probably will stand again next time, maybe for a different job.
Oh, wait and see.
It's an interesting insight, Jackie, into his perspective on all of this. But do we think, I mean, looking at all PCCs across England and Wales, does the role make a significant difference, do we think?
Well, it replaced police authorities, so they have oversight over what the Chief Constable is doing in that area, what they've promised to do, and where they deliver on those promises. So that is the measure, if you like, that the public can say whether they're successful or not. They each have their own priorities as well, which are published. And the key to it all is the interaction between the PCCs and the public, whether they're raising awareness of their existence and allowing the public to pass on their views. I mean, Kevin said in that film that he felt he had a good understanding. Only the public in Surrey can say whether he's doing a good job or not, and he has to be re-elected. So it's going to be a measure of how successful they've been every time there's an election. But unless you know what they're doing, how do you know they've been successful or not?
And yet he said, when you put to him, well, you're a bit like an MP, he said, no, I'm much more influential than a backbench MP, and yet there is, obviously he's bringing a political element to this role, which is a significant shift, isn't it?
It's very significant. The police authorities were appointed. There was oversight over what they did, as well as as them giving oversight of the actual force they were in charge of. But now it's almost like they have a free hand because they are elected by the public, and yet the public don't know what they're doing. So clearly, it's a role that has to be developed. It has to be some scrutiny of it, and that's where the question mark is how do you scrutinise an elected politician who's scrutinising someone else? I mean, and at the moment there's no accountability particularly other than the media.
Yeah, it would be good to get your thoughts on that this morning and throughout the day. We're both going to be checking our Twitter throughout the day for your views on the programme today and for your views on that in particular. We've got more coming up with Jackie in a moment. Just that we've got the usual appeal for help tracing missing people, 3 more people for you to focus on this week, and how all frontline police officers in London will soon be recording you on camera.